Hi everyone, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who don't know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens and learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. As we've been reading through the Gospel according to Spiritism together, for the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about the chapter 5, which is Blessed are the Afflicted. And they took Jesus's words, right, that's in the Bible that are saying that Jesus is saying, blessed are the afflicted. And what he means by this is it's good when we have struggles, when we have hardship, when we are afflicted, because that means that's giving us the opportunity to learn and grow and overcome something. And hopefully if we overcome it, then we'll have succeeded in that test and be able to move on to something better. So blessed are the afflicted because we're not in one place. We're being tested so that we can improve and progress. So that's what we want to do. We don't want to stay still. We don't want to have nothing going wrong, because the hardships are what help us improve, help us evolve. And last week we left off specifically in the middle of the section, forgetfulness of the past. And with that, they were saying how it's important, it's necessary that we forget the past, because if we remembered, it would be a lot harder to overcome some of our struggles. Like, say we had a really bad fight with our best friend in a previous life. If I come back with that person, if I remember that we had that huge fight, I might still be mad at them. But not remembering, I might be able to make amends with that person and learn to like them again and learn to be happy with them again. And many situations of this, and there's so many we can go on and on about these situations because everyone goes through different experiences. So it's important that we forget the past because it actually helps us to succeed. Because a lot of the things we wouldn't be able to do if we actually remembered, oh, I'm struggling through this because of this and this and this. It would be a lot harder for us to face those challenges, or for us to know how many times we've already failed the same test. Say, oh, I'm going through this struggle. Let me try and tackle it. Let me do my best. But if we remember our past lives, maybe we've been failing that test for so many reincarnations that we almost want to give up. So it is important that we forget the past. So let's continue where we left off, which is the middle of that section of forgetfulness of the past. Moreover, this forgetfulness only occurs during bodily existence. Once returning to the spiritual world, the remembrance of the past is regained. So it is only temporary, a slight interruption similar to that which occurs during sleep, but which does not prevent the remembrance on the subsequent day of what was done on the previous one. So again, this forgetfulness of the past is only when we go into this corporeal world. Once we disincarnate and we go back to just our spiritual state, then we get that past again. We get the past and future, and we see how everything clicks together, and we put it all together to really learn from it. So it's only temporary, this forgetfulness of the past. But it is not only after so-called death that the spirit may recover remembrance of the past. It can be said it is never lost, even while incarnated. As experience demonstrates that during sleep, being a period where a certain amount of liberty is enjoyed, the spirit is conscious of its past acts. It knows why it is suffering, and that it is suffering justly. Memory is only extinguished during the course of exterior existences, in the life of relationships. But during these particular remembrances, if they were otherwise, might cause added suffering and harm social relations, the spirit absorbs new strengths from these moments of emancipation of the soul, if he knows how to take advantage of them. So they're also saying that here that death is not, like death of the corporeal body, is not the only way that we can remember our past. Because we know that when we sleep, when our body is resting and recharging, our spirit has some freedom, has some liberty, right? To kind of roam more and be free as we are in the spirit state, but we know that our corporeal body like holds us down, kind of restricts us. But during sleep, our spirit is freed a little bit. So they're saying that the spirit then can see, okay, we're going through this because of these things that we suffered. We're suffered justly, like we did something, so we're going to repay for it. And so they're saying, so it doesn't mean that we lose this memory completely. It's just like hidden in the back of our minds while we are incarnated. So it's not even like it's taken out of us. We still have it. It's just kind of like a sleeping part of our brain that's not that we usually don't have access to. But we see some people that do have access to it when we see like child prodigies, right? Or children who know crazy history, or they know how to play the piano super well. It's because they have that remembrance. They mastered playing the piano in a previous life, and now they came back, and when they're a child, they still know how to do it because they still have that remembrance. So we do see some cases where people do have the remembrance, but oftentimes it's not beneficial for us to know exactly what happened in our past. And now we're on to the next section, which is motives for resignation. With the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they will be consoled," Jesus indicates the compensation that awaits those who suffer, and the resignation that leads us to bless suffering as a prelude to the cure. These words can also be understood in this manner, that one should be content to suffer, seeing that the pain of this world is the payment for past debts that have been incurred. Patiently supported here on earth, these pains will save centuries of debt by permitting payment now, therefore guaranteeing a tranquil future. So we know that when we're going through these struggles and suffering, if we're doing the right thing and pushing ourselves to do the best, then there will be compensation, right? Like we'll overcome those challenges that we haven't overcome yet, and we'll be a little bit more evolved. We'll be able to tackle new challenges, and maybe make up for past mistakes. So we are blessed to have the suffering so that we can improve ourselves. Like they said, it's a prelude to the cure. So once we're suffering, it's like, okay, I'm suffering, but I can get through this. And then once we get through it, it's like, wow, already I accomplished that. Now we're getting closer to accomplishing something else. And they also said that how we've been talking about it is that it also is how we pay past debts, right? We're suffering because we did something. We don't suffer for no reason. We suffer because we made a mistake, and now we're gonna have to suffer. If we didn't study for the test, we're gonna fail it, right? And that's our own fault. So then we learn for the next test, maybe I should study so we don't fail it. So it's the same thing. It could be a debt from a past life, it can be a little debt, it can be a big debt, but we're going to repay it. So they're saying we should be happy to be suffering now, because that means that we're being given the opportunity to repay this debt right away. Because or else, if you're not suffering, that means something's coming, right? Because we're not perfect yet here on earth. So that means that if I'm not suffering right now, that means something's coming, because I know I have a lot of mistakes that I haven't fixed yet. So those mistakes are gonna come back for me. So that's why they're saying it's a blessing when we have these sufferings, because that means we're given the opportunity to repay these debts now instead of in the future. The sufferer is like a debtor who owes a large sum of money, to whom the creditor says, "If you pay me even 100th part of your debt today, I will exonerate you, and you will be free. But if you do not, then I shall torment you till you pay the very last installment." Would not the debtor feel happy in supporting all kinds of hardship in order to liberate himself, so paying only 100th part of what he owed? Instead of complaining to the creditor, would he not be grateful? So here they're saying, if we have the chance to fix even a little small thing, wouldn't it be better that we fix that little small thing so we start improving ourselves and overcoming some of our challenges, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to fix it today, and then you don't fix it, so then you're just going to keep suffering and suffering through that until you decide, okay, now I'm going to fix it. So the same thing with the test. Maybe you didn't study for a test and then you failed the test. It's one thing to say, oh, okay, that was a big mistake, let me fix that. And now the next 6 we study and we pass the test, and that's great. So right there, we already paid that debt. We already fixed that wrong that we did, showed that we could do it, and improved. Or we can be like, oh, I already failed the last one anyway, I might as well fail this one. And then we'll be in a failing cycle, right? And then we'll be suffering, our grades are suffering, all of our academics are suffering now because we're not studying. Until one day we'll say, okay, now we need to fix this, now we need to study so we can do good on the test. So, isn't it better if we just do a little bit from the beginning than have to suffer all of that just to get to the same conclusion? Because even if we suffer for thousands of reincarnations, it's never just going to go away. We need to have repaid those mistakes that we made. This is the meaning of the words, blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled. They are happy because they are paying their debts, and also because after payment they will be free. However, if one acquitted himself on one side, a man becomes indebted on the other. He will never find liberation. Therefore, each new fault only increases the debt, there being not even one that does not entail a compelling or inevitable punishment. If not today, then tomorrow. If not in this life, then in another. Amongst the list of failings, it behooves a person to put the lack of submission to God's will in first place. So if we complain about our afflictions, if we do not accept them with resignation, or if we accuse God of being unjust, we contract new debts, which in turn make us lose the fruits that we have gathered from these sufferings. This is why we must begin again from the start, exactly as if after paying part of a debt to a creditor who has been tormenting us, we then took out another loan. So the other thing is, we know we're making up for our mistakes and things that we're not doing, even if we're not doing anything bad, but we're not doing anything good. So we're paying for our mistakes. So if you make up for one mistake just to make another mistake, then you're just accumulating more sufferings that we're going to have to go through. So it's saying, it's just like you've been suffering with this debt and you finally pay a part of it, but then you take out another loan. Well, now you have a whole other one to pay, let alone the little piece that you still have of the other one. So now you're just accumulating that suffering. So it's the same, or if the test, finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to study, and I start studying, but then I slack off on another class because I'm studying for this one class. So again, now we're accumulating more. So it's about consistency, right? We need to continually be trying to do the best and do good and make up for and fix our sufferings, right? Because those are fixing past mistakes, but also trying hard not to make new mistakes that we have to go through. Or if we make a new mistake, try and fix it quickly so we don't have to suffer again for another situation. On entering into the spiritual world, we are like the laborer who arrives on the day of payment. To some, God will say, "Here is your recompense for the days you have worked." While to others, the so-called lucky ones on earth, who have lived in idleness, or who have built their happiness on the satisfaction of their own self-esteem and on worldly pleasures, he will say, "There is nothing more to come. You have already received your salary on earth. Go and begin your tasks again." So here they're saying, when we get to the spiritual world, for those who are working through our struggles and who are doing the best to do good, they're going to say, okay, you did these things right, here's your recompensation, right? Like here's the things you did right, here's the new things you had to accomplish, and there's some recompensation for that. But those who, like, let's say the ones that we look up to, the ones that we think are lucky, but the ones that are just rich and just do nothing. Like, if they were born rich and that was it, they just lived their whole lives doing nothing because they didn't have to. Well, those people, he's going to say, well, go back to earth and try again, because there's still all these things that you have to accomplish and you did nothing. So it's important to always be trying our best, even if it's little things, because those little things add up, right? We need to fix them anyway. Might as well fix them now, because or else we're just gonna reincarnate and then have to fix them in a different life, in a different life, in a different life. So we might as well do it now. We can soften or increase the bitterness of our trials according to the manner in which we regard earthly life. Our suffering will be all the more depending on how long we imagine it to be. But those who can see life through a spiritual premise understand bodily existence at a glance. They see that life is but a point in eternity. They comprehend the shortness of its duration and recognize that this painful moment will soon pass. The certainty of a happier future sustains and animates them, and far from complaining, they offer thanks to God for the pain, which they permit them to advance. On the other hand, for all those who see only bodily life before them, the duration seems interminable, and the pain oppresses it with all its weight. So it also depends on how we look at life, right? So if we're looking from a spiritual aspect, we see that one reincarnation is like such a short amount of time. So we have this short amount of time, this little point in time in eternity, to try and make up for our mistakes and do the best we can. But for people who are just looking at the body life, one, it seems like, oh, this is going to go on forever, like 100 years. But imagine the centuries we've lived. And also, their pain is going to seem like so much more, because with all its weight, because they're going to feel all that pain and suffering for just this short amount of time, right? If we're only thinking about our bodily existence. But instead, we have to look at the spiritual aspect and see that these sufferings are a blessing to us, so that we can improve now instead of keep doing this forever and ever, because we'll always have to improve it if we don't improve it now. The result of looking at life in a spiritual way is a diminishing in importance of all worldly things. Thus we feel ourselves compelled to moderate our desires and to be content with our position without envying others. This in turn enables us to receive weakened impressions of reverses and deception that may be experienced. From these attitudes come calmness and resignation, so useful to bodily health as well to the soul. Whereas from jealousy, envy, and ambition, we voluntarily condemn ourselves to torture, increasing misery and anguishing during our short existence. So also it's about doing good and knowing that we're all suffering for certain reasons, so there's no reason to envy one another, right? And we're all just working together. And when we have these attitudes, we'll have calmness and we'll be able to go through these struggles a lot easier. But when we're going to be jealous and envious and prideful and all of those things, it's going to torture us, because we're going to, one, even if we are making up for some mistakes, we're making more mistakes by being envious and jealous of people. And so we're just going to increase our misery, like they said, and we're just going to be more stressed in our existence, in this short existence. So it's also important to just elevate ourselves all in all and realize that everyone's going through their own thing, right? No one's better than one another. We're all equal. So with that attitude, we can become, and it can help us to perform the test that we have to go through. So that's the end of that section, and the next section is suicide and madness. So I want to make sure we have enough time for that section to fill it completely, so we'll save it for next week. So before we leave off today, I'd like to reread the passages from the Bible where Jesus says, "Blessed are the afflicted," because I think those are very important for us to understand that it's not just Spiritism saying this, it is Jesus who was quoted to say these things, and whose Spiritism is just taking one step further in helping us understand. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:4, 6, and 10. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, Blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God belongs to you. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Luke 6:20 and 21. But woe to you are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Luke 6:24 and 25. So it shows that it's important for us to think like Jesus really said these, right? And specifically here, Luke and Matthew wrote it down that he said this. And it's so important because we suffer and we think, oh, why am I suffering? Why am I the one that's always suffering? But it's a blessing. It's a blessing for us to be able to struggle through something so that we can overcome it and do better. And it truly is a blessing, even though it seems so difficult when we're going through it, or it seems so unfair. But we know it's not unfair, and actually we're lucky. We're lucky to go through this now, because imagine if we're suffering this now, imagine if we keep suffering this again and again and again, no matter what it is. That's just horrible. So we're lucky to have the chance to see this challenge that we're going through and overcome it, so that we never have to go through that challenge again. So we'll end off a little early today, just because I want to make sure that we finish Suicide and Madness all in one time and not have to split it up. But before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations for today's date, July 23rd. Looking around. Do not look back in anger or forward in fear, but around in awareness. We look back in anger at the people who hurt us, the frustrations we felt, the bad luck we endured. We look forward in fear at the possibility that we might lose our job, contract a disease, or suffer the death of a loved one. The place we need to be is right here, right now, not looking anxiously as what has been or what might be, but fully aware of what is. I take a deep breath knowing that I'm lucky to be alive. I have survived challenges in the past and will survive challenges in the future. Nothing needed distracts me from living my life today. So if at all you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk more about, want me to explain more, or even if it's not related to what we're reading right now in the book, feel free to email me at kardicradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Kardic Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kardic Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.